Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. Charles Leclerc has revealed Ferrari's internal deadline for when they intend to yet again win a World Drivers' Championship is 2026, far beyond the impatience that Leclerc has for getting the job done sooner than that. If they don't deliver a championship over the next couple of years, there's a real possibility that Leclerc will move on from Ferrari. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. The Las Vegas Grand Prix reveal launch party thing is going on later on today. Quick comment on Nico Hülkenberg. According to some sources, the deal is done and Hülkenberg will be announced as the second driver alongside Kevin Magnussen for Haas this Thursday. That is the rumour just ahead of the Brazilian Grand Prix. Far from a guarantee, but it's been leading this way for quite some time. So probably Mick Schumacher is indeed out of a drive next season. Quick word on Sebastian Vettel. Some interesting statements coming out from Vettel actually in terms of his potential Formula 1 comeback. We saw a few weeks ago when, of course, the season started out very poorly for Aston Martin. They were really struggling to get out of Q1 at all. Their car has probably been one of the cars that's made the most progress over the season. Okay, last race wasn't very good in Mexico, but before that, they were looking pretty good. He even led a lap or a couple of laps of a race back in Austin, of course, in the Texas Grand Prix at COTA, and he had a great time at Suzuka as well, and even said at Suzuka that, well, look, okay, I'm retiring, but if you guys want me to come back for one race at Suzuka, I'm not going to say no, because he loves it round there. So he said that he'd like to rule out the return. He'd like to say, I'm not coming back, that's my career done, but he just cannot rule it out. He knows that obviously racing's been a huge part of his life for, a couple of decades, so he knows it's going to be difficult to step away. He says, I have no idea how I'll be ticking in a year or two. I do a sport that you can still return to after a 2-year break. So it's interesting because we said the other day, what are the chances if Audi Sauber come through, they actually build a good car, they want a German driver, imagine Vettel and Mick Schumacher both at the same team. That would be a very exciting possibility. And we've seen other drivers in the past that have retired and then returns. And he says, look, I'd like to rule out the F1 return, but I can't. I don't know what I'm doing in a couple of years. However, I hope that in 2 years I say, no thanks, I don't need racing anymore. But that's not always the case with drivers of the past. He says, I'm not even sure I want to watch races. F1 was my purpose in life for 16 years. Now I secretly have an expectation of myself to be fine without Formula 1. If you like doing something, you're allowed to hang on to it. But I want to go the other way, break away and realize there are enough other exciting things I'll manage to open the next door and find my happiness there. So he's hoping he can step away, but he still can't be absolutely sure that if in 2 years' time a good opportunity is offered to him at a car that might be more competitive. Because I wonder if the Aston Martin had been better, to be honest, would he have retired? I'm not so convinced, to be honest. If he was up there fighting at the front end of the field, I think there's a good chance Vettel would have stayed around. But unfortunately, he will retire, but he's not ruling out the possibility of a return down the line. Hamilton, of course, is looking to compete a few more years. He said a multi-year deal is on the cards for him to extend his contract at Mercedes up until, he's potentially going to be 40 and beyond. So Hamilton, Alonso still absolutely frying at ages where most drivers are very much out of the sport. Of course, it depends on the car largely, what's going to happen next season. Aston Martin reckon this year's car was kind of a step towards the learnings and improvements for next season. That's where all the cars are focused on right now, all the teams building next year's car as well as it possibly can go. And of course, Mercedes is saying, look, they're a few months behind. They want to catch up to Red Bull. Red Bull will again be the favourites for next season, but that might change over time, especially because of the penalty that is going to start to have some effect as the season progresses next year with a 10% reduction in testing time. So Mercedes, we expect to be more competitive next season. Ferrari, do we expect them to be able to compete the same way with the Red Bulls as they were at the start of the season? They probably took their foot off the gas a little bit last season. There was a lot of optimism around Ferrari coming into this year. They delivered the goods on that at the start of the season, then it fell apart very quickly. Will this be another case of Ferrari starting well, falling back into the front of the midfield? Can they keep this up going forward, or was this their best chance in a very long time to actually win a championship? They failed to deliver, and can they turn it up next year, especially when they've probably got a more competitive Mercedes next season to wrestle with, not just Red Bull and Max Verstappen. So Ferrari's not so concerned apparently about Mercedes, because Ferrari have said, no, we're focusing on next year, which is usually what they say every year. It doesn't always work out. And Leclerc was a very interesting article, an interview that was done, I believe, before Mexico, where he talked about after Melbourne, right after the Australian Grand Prix, leading the championship by 45, 48 points, whatever it was, over Verstappen after the double DNF for Verstappen. It was looking all so good for Ferrari. Their car was great. It looked reliable, looked very fast. And people were saying at the time, wow, if Ferrari don't win a championship this year, how how Ferrari fans going to recover, right? And it's been a difficult time since then. All the DNFs, the mechanical issues, and even if those didn't happen, the reality is they probably would still have lost the championship. The Red Bull was too strong, Verstappen was too strong, and Leclerc, his championship went away a long time ago. He's now even third in the drivers. He's probably not even going to get second. Perez is more than likely going to get P2 in this year's drivers championship, and Ferrari's drivers currently sit P3 and P6 in the drivers, despite having the second best car, the best qualifying car. They have more pole positions, Ferrari, than any other team this season. I think they have 11 pole positions, so they will take the majority of poles this season, regardless of what Red Bull do from now to the end of the year, because Russell got that one right. So the maximum poles Red Bull can get is 10. Ferrari have more poles, but yet, where did their race pace go? Now, Leclerc says next year the intention is 100% to win the World Drivers' Championship. He says he's very impatient. He doesn't want to wait around any longer. This year, Ferrari and Mattia Binotto said the intention was to be competitive. The intention was to be in the hunt, in the fight, and then next year the intention is to win. Now, apparently those numbers are changing a little bit, because as Leclerc says here, I want to be world champion in 2023. I know the president, John Elkann, has said that it's a goal to be achieved by 2026, but I cannot accept this deadline. I am very impatient. I'll do everything I can to win the world championship in 2023. So whether this date internally, which I hadn't honestly heard of before, of 2026 is for the drivers or the constructors, maybe it's the drivers. I'm not really sure what the situation is there, but I thought that Mattia Binotto says that year one of the new regs, the plan is to be competitive. Year two is to win, which is okay. It's a reasonable plan. You could think that the idea is to try and win every year, but now are they pushing that back to 2026? I mean, look, that's 4 years time. That's 3 seasons, 2023, 24, 25, with no championship, and then they want to win in 2026. If that happens, it's doubtful if Leclerc, their star guy, is still going to be around. Especially because of his impatience, clearly, to win a championship. He knows he's capable of it. Yes, maybe his driving style and his mistakes need to be a bit more refined, but he's got it within him to win a World Drivers' Championship. Even if right now he's not quite the driver capable of achieving that, he probably would if he had the right car. If you give Leclerc the Red Bull this season, you give Verstappen the Ferrari, Leclerc's going to win the championship, in my opinion. So, obviously you can't always say like that because cars are designed for certain drivers, but you know what I mean. Ferrari say 2026 they want to win a championship. Leclerc is not happy with that, as of course I'm sure is not Carlos Sainz. This I also thought was very interesting, that at the start of the season he had to adapt to the new cars. The cars were heavier, and as he said here, personally the aspect I liked the most was having a strong front end, so kind of an oversteery car, kind of like Verstappen liked. You turn it into the corner, the front end responds. If you have to control a bit of oversteer, you have to do it. Certain drivers like one way or another. So Charles liked that, right? He says he really liked the strong front ends. I think Sainz has a rather different preference though, and especially at the beginning of the season, the handling was just what I like. Now, over the season, we have seen in general that Sainz has caught up to Leclerc, and honestly, in Mexico, Sainz was a good half a tenth faster per lap than Leclerc was. He can talk about setup and everything, but it's quite clear that as the season has gone on, the Red Bull was starting to cater towards Verstappen, right? We saw that at the start of the season, Perez, Verstappen on relatively similar pace, actually. The car wasn't really suiting Verstappen's preferences. As the season went on, the car started to favour Verstappen, and that gap with Perez grew pretty substantially. Now, it was almost the other way around at Ferrari, right? Instead of catering their car philosophy and setup and everything to Leclerc, their number one guy, they tried to find a middle ground between both drivers, and it's not exactly hurt them both, but it certainly, it doesn't suit Leclerc as much as the Red Bull suits Verstappen. And that's a question they will have to answer internally, right? Because if you want to win the World Drivers' Championship, you've probably got to just put it all in your star man. That's what Mercedes have done with Hamilton for several years. That's what Red Bull are clearly doing with Verstappen, what they used to do with Vettel back in the day. So, they've got to make a call. And this is what Leclerc says on his future then. I have a contract until 2024, and I see that as a long way away. I've always loved Ferrari, and I want to win with this team as soon as possible. When the time comes, I will think about my future, but I love this team. So yeah, he said recently that he kind of doesn't want to leave and everything. Of course, he's not going to say he wants to leave, but his statements in this article are kind of, you can read between the lines a bit. He's saying Ferrari only want to win in 4 years' time. Is that the ambition that Leclerc has? No, he's impatient, wants to win immediately. If they can't give him the car and the teamwork and, the strategy calls to make that happen, then Leclerc's not going to be a happy man. He's going to see Verstappen win another couple of titles. He's going to maybe even see Hamilton or Russell get one in there if the Mercedes is good. And he's going to be sitting there thinking he's wasted some of his prime years after a few years in Formula One with Ferrari, who can't seem to deliver him the goods. Yes, they've got fantastic fans, and what a brand and an image and what a legendary history they have in Formula One and just motorsport in general. But if they can't deliver a good good team, then Leclerc's probably going to want to go, right? So he says, look, it's a couple of years away my contract ends, but if he gets to the end of 2024, they haven't won, they're not looking that much closer to winning than they were this season, then will he decide to leave if the Red Bull seat is open, if the Mercedes seat is open? I don't know. Then why not, right? And maybe there's another team that's competitive at that time because that's what the new regulations are intending to achieve. So what do you expect to happen to Leclerc? Like, he's kind of synonymous in a way with Ferrari, but at the same time, he obviously almost seems like he has more ambition than Ferrari do at times, right? Like, Ferrari, they started very well. It's a bit of a consistent trend where things fall off a bit, and then can they really get back there next season? It felt to me that this season was the chance. Red Bull at the start of the year had a bit of an unreliable car. Mercedes were nowhere near the fight. Next year, we'd expect Mercedes to be right in the fight. Red Bull are going to be probably even better than they are now. So Ferrari have to do very well next season to compete, and all those strategical errors and kind of mechanical failures and stuff will come back to bite them if the season progresses next year as it has this season. And just to kind of sum this up, actually thought an interesting stat here from F1 Stats Guru looking at Grand Prix victories in non-championship winning cars. So cars that didn't win the Drivers' or the Constructors' Championship that year, who has won the most races in a car that fits that category. And it's kind of course, like, this shows to some degree, you know, driver ability in different cars or whatever, but what it shows to me is that the top three drivers here are from, at least in part, the Ferrari days. You know, Schumacher, Vettel, Alonso, all Ferrari drivers, won a fair few races in cars that didn't win the championship. Now, does that mean they're just incredible drivers that can win races in cars that aren't good enough? Yeah, it does to some degree, but maybe it also shows that they had a car that could have won a championship but didn't. And you know, that's the Ferrari kind of Ferrari philosophy in a nutshell you could at least look at. So I don't know, interesting future for Leclerc, but it seems kind of clear to me that if things don't go well over the next couple of years, he is going to be dipping out of Ferrari if he believes that's his best chance to be able to win a World Drivers' Championship. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.